Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Spring 2024 Augusta Baker Lecture Series, Critical Conversations. My name is Nicole Cook, and I am the Augusta Baker Endowed Chair and Professor at the iSchool at the University of South Carolina. I am so grateful to see everyone here today, and it's wonderful to see where everyone's coming in from. We are so grateful for your time and attention, and we are excited to welcome you to this series that is celebrating Black men in librarianship. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Sierra Harris, who is the Augusta Baker GA.
Hi, friends. It feels like we haven't seen each other in so long, but I'm so excited that we are getting started back with our programming for the spring. You all are in for a treat the entire semester. The spring series is not going to disappoint. I think it's going to exceed everyone's expectations. So, as you all know, my name is Sierra Harris, and I have the immense pleasure of introducing our speakers today. But before we get started, I wanted to go over some quick Zoom housekeeping details. So, today's session is being recorded, and the recording will be sent to every registered guest at the conclusion of the session. We ask that you mute yourself during today's presentation, but utilize the chat feature to engage throughout. If you have any technical concerns throughout the presentation, please send me a direct message and I will address those as quickly as I can. There will be a time where you will be encouraged to unmute yourself and ask questions. So make note of the questions throughout. Now, let's get on to the good stuff. Our featured guest today is Dr. Jerome Offord. Dr. Offord is the Associate University Librarian for Antiracism at Harvard. Expanding upon the library's strong record for diversity initiatives, he collaborates extensively to develop strategies for systemic change through the library's workforce, services, collections, and spaces. Before joining Harvard, Dr. Offord served as the Vice President for Business Administration at Dieta Jones and Associates. Dr. Offord has held several Senate cabinet positions at Lincoln University of Missouri, at HBCU, over the span of 8 years. Initially hired as the Dean of Library Services and Archives, he was soon asked to serve as the interim provost and the interim chief information officer. He was subsequently appointed to Chief of Staff to the President and then Dean of Administration and Student Affairs. Dr. Offord's educational credentials include a PhD in Library and Information Science with an emphasis in managerial leadership from Simmons University in Boston, master's degrees, plural, multiple, in Library and Information Science from Catholic University of America, and in Student Affairs and Higher Education from Colorado State University, and an Executive MBA from Washington University in St. Louis, and a Bachelor of Science in Agriculture from Lincoln University. Today's conversation will be moderated by Gerald Moore. Gerald Moore is a 1996 graduate of the University of South Carolina's Library and Information MLIS program. Gerald has been employed with the Charleston County Public Library for over 27 years. For 23 of those years, he has worked as a part of the library's management team. On a professional level, Mr. Moore has served as the chair and vice chair of the South Carolina Library Association Roundtable for African American Concerns. He is an active member of the State Library Association, as well as the Black Caucus of the American Library Association, where he serves as a member of the Literary Awards Committee. When he's not transforming lives by performing library work, programming, and services, Mr. Moore enjoys listening to music, reading, and writing. He is currently writing his first novel and short story collection. So let's all welcome Dr. Offord and Gerald Moore today.
Thank you. Thank you, Sierra, and thank you, Dr. Cook, for the opportunity. And Dr. Offord, I am certainly looking forward to this conversation, and we're just going to dive right in.
Awesome.
Sierra mentioned your esteemed and illustrious list of credentials, and so I wanted to start off by asking, can you tell us about your educational background and how it led you to pursue a career in library and information science?
Sure. And I'm so happy to be here and honored to be invited to speak as a part of this historic conversation. My background, or I consider myself to be kind of a unicorn in the profession. Like most of us in the profession, this was a second career path for me. I started off in agriculture because I went to the nation's first urban agricultural high school in Chicago. And my dream at that point in time was to be an ag educator, to go back to my high school and be a teacher. And so I attended Lincoln University, Missouri, which is an HBCU. And in the ag program, I was shared about opportunities to go to internships. So I went to Colorado State one summer and met two RDs there, Alex Beza and his wife, Michelle. And based on my involvement with student government, had been just joined the fraternity. They said to me, well, have you considered student affairs? And I was like, well, what's that? And so that conversation led to me pursuing student affairs and higher education. And so I've been in higher ed for most of my career. That brought me to DC, did a few years at American University in George Washington. And then it's most of us BIPOC folks experience, we have some form of guilt about not giving back to our communities. So I took 3.5 years off to work for a local nonprofit focused on HIV prevention for the Black community. And then migrated back to higher ed with my diversity experience at the Association of Research Libraries. This is where it got really interesting. So while many folks, didn't have an MLS at that point, so I wasn't accepted fully in the community as a librarian, but I was accepted as my background in diversity. So I wanted at that point in time to get a PhD in higher education. And the director of ARL, Executive Director Dwayne Webster, challenged me and said, would you consider doing an MLS degree instead of a PhD? And I asked if he would pay for it, or the association would pay for it. He said yes. I said yes. And lo and behold, once I started the program and got more and more connected with VC, ALA, I really found this was my second home. And so library science became a part of my passion in my career. And so gone on from there to do the PhD at Simmons, and then wanted to do the MBA at WashU. So that's been my track record. Of course, started off at ARL as a diversity officer. Then I went to OCLC as a diversity officer. Then I got the magical phone call to come home to be the dean of the library of my alma mater. Did that. Went on to consulting with Deetta Jones and Associates, and then joined Harvard in 2021.
Awesome. Very good. Very good. So now I want to take it a little bit personal and just ask you about your personal journey and personal experiences with racism and how it shaped the work that you do, because in your position now, and the title that you hold now, you deal with that. So if you could share a little bit about your journey and personal experiences that brought you to that work. Thank you.
Well, they start, great question. They start from childhood. We all are a product of our environment. And so I was raised by my grandparents. I was kind of their first grandchild from their union, but also their sixth child per se. And so everything that they felt they did wrong with all their other children, it got landed at my feet. So one of those was going to college and learning from my grandfather as a Black man in America, someone who fled the South during Jim Crow era, being one generation away from slavery, that there was a lot of things that he taught me as a young Black boy, even living in Chicago, which Dr. King classified as one of the racist cities in America, and segregated cities in America. And so there were things that I had to learn about survival, navigating the city. And so some of my experiences and thoughts are from that perspective, and some of the biases that I created around safety, as well as navigating the world as a Black boy and as a Black man, came from that perspective. But then as a child, we were the second Black family to move into a neighborhood, and having a KKK parade 2 blocks from my house as a kid. In high school, I mentioned earlier, my high school was brand new. They assumed that it was going to be predominantly white. It turned out to be predominantly Black and Latino in a predominantly white Irish community that was considered one of the segregated areas of the city. So we had cross burning. And this is 1986, so this wasn't like it's 1950. So we had cross burnings, we had threats, we had the police had to escort the city bus from the high school to a particular line where it was more integrated of the city. So all of those things are at the foundation of who I am, as well as going to a small HBCU in a predominantly white town and dealing with, for the first time, really noticing being followed in stores or hearing a special code come on in the mall when there was a group of us from campus in the mall. So all of those experiences for me helped me navigate the world as a Black man and dealing with racism. And other parts of my career, I've dealt with it as well. But in my current role, and for those of you who are paying attention to anything that's happening, meaning it's been quiet at Harvard for the last 6 months, of course, have noticed that we have been under fire for various activities, but I believe most of it is rooted in racism. And so Harvard Library, when they created this position, was very intentional after the George Floyd murder to make it a position around anti-racism and to confront racism within the organization. And that's been a challenge, but it's been a welcome challenge. There are people who are strong allies and co-contributors in this work, but there's a lot. One of the fondest things I can remember I won't even call it a microaggression anymore. I call it a macroaggression. Someone asked me on my 90th day, says, "So you've been here 90 days. How are you going to change Harvard?" And my response was like, "So Harvard's been here 350 years. I can't change it in 90 days." So just the concept, this Black guy is going to show up and in 90 days, all the racism in Harvard is going to go away is what is the unexpected expectations that people put on those of us who are doing DEI work, that, we're supposed to come in and be the great savior. And that is what contributes to a lot of burnout for folks, because sometimes we don't talk about it or challenge it in our roles. So racism is still alive and well in our country. You can turn on CNN, MSNBC, Fox News. I just saw something on Instagram today. One of the Fox News contributors said that Donald Trump's new sneaker line is going to lure Black voters because we love sneakers. And I just sat there and was like, really? It's going to get my vote a pair of $399 ugly sneakers from a man whose values are completely opposite mine. But the fact that someone, a white male, believed that and still believes it in 2024 means we have a lot of work to do.
A lot. Thank you for sharing that. That's powerful. I could just see that very vividly when you were describing that. Growing up with your grandparents and having those experiences and things. Thank you for sharing that. I want to segue a little bit into just Black male librarians in the profession and give you some numbers. So according to the 2023 U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, it shows that nearly 81% of librarians are white, while only 7% are Black. And I just wanted to ask you, in your opinion, what do you think it'll take to attract more Black librarians, and not only that, but keep them on the job?
That's a very exhausting question. And it's something I've dealt with since my days at ARL back in 2006. And the profession has struggled with it. But the profession, I don't believe, has sat down and really looked at under, not the surface level, but under the iceberg issues impacting BIPOC retention in our profession as a whole. I think there's a lot of things culturally about our profession that leads to gender bias, which we know. For years, these positions or librarian work was considered to be a woman's job. Even if folks never said it, they thought it. And that the leaders of those libraries happen to be men, which is a part of our sexist history in this country. But I think we have to present the profession differently. And I feel like I've done that. I believe there's several people on here, I saw names pop up of young Black men that I recruited to the profession, but it was never about just talking to them about libraries and librarianship. It was about the experience, what they can give, what they can learn, the impact and how it connects to their passion and their work. So I think we have to have a different way of saying, oh, this is a great profession. Because even within the profession, we have our issues. Everybody in the profession is not in support of DEI. Everybody in the profession, as we know, during the 9/11 days, were not in support of, or some were in support of the Patriot Act. So even within the profession, we assume that the profession is Pollyanna, and it's not. And as long as we continue to believe and profess that we're Pollyanna, then we're going to continue to see folks, BIPOC folks and other marginalized groups say, no, you're not. There's issues, there's racism, there's discrimination, there's sexism, there's genderism, there's ableism. All of those things are still here. But I also want to honor the Black men who came before me. I saw Stanton Biddle pop up, E.J. Josie,
Mhm.
others from BCLA, Josh Holman, other BCLA leaders who came before me who have been doing this work, as well as the wonderful women, Sylvia Hamlin, Wanda Brown, all of those folks who have been on the forefront of increasing diversity in the profession, and not just for Blacks, but just diversity in general. They did what they did when they could in the confines of what they have, but now we're in a new era, and so we have to find a way to attract folks. I think one of the ways that I was able to do it at Lincoln University in Missouri is that my predecessor, Elizabeth Wilson, who was the librarian of Lincoln for many moons, created and convinced the institution to create a minor in library science. And so when I got to Lincoln, I really poured my heart and soul into that program to do two things. And I told people, I said, one is everyone that takes library science classes as an undergraduate will not all become librarians. Though I had 6 Black men in the program go on to become librarians. But I said the subliminal objective for me is if I can create a cadre of young Black folks who support and understand the role and the mission of libraries, public, academic, special, whichever kind, who may have never been introduced to the profession, we've done a great job. So if we can recruit folks and we can have folks that understand us and support us, those are the two magical pieces that help us build a better community. I think the profession still needs to talk about retention. We need to talk about salaries. We need to talk about promotions. We need to talk about tenure and permanent status, how all of those play into some of the barriers that exist within our profession.
Awesome. Very good. Very good. Your title is Associate University Librarian for Antiracism. So for those of us that maybe want to know the specific things that you do on a daily basis, can you walk us through what a typical day is like in your current role and explain how you personally are approaching the work? You've already said a lot of it, but we want to dig a little bit deeper and find out how you incorporate diversity and inclusivity.
So I would say, like most people, most of my day is on Zoom and meetings. And I am highly engaged with the senior leadership team. So the benefit of being at the senior leader level is I get to engage with other senior leaders who are doing work in the library. And anything that I do is I always continue to challenge senior leaders first, because we should role model what we expect managers to do. But at the heart of any organizational change, it's always the managers. The mid-managers are the stern of the organizations. And if we could leverage that base to help us change and implement strategies, and not necessarily always having to be from the senior leaders down, that tremendously helps change culture. So for the last, I'll be 3 years in April, I've been at Harvard. The first year was really learning. For folks that don't know much about Harvard, it's an extremely decentralized organization. So which means the learning curve is stronger when you join. And so I spent my first 3 months, I think I held 20 open sessions with staff and met with 300 people just to talk about what they thought some of the issues were, what they think the strategy should be. And so this year we're writing our advancing, we call it equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging, our ADIBA efforts in Harvard Library. And that approach is our framework that we use in our anti-racism framework is people, practices, and policies. And so how will we continue to use the anti-racist framework to review policies, to look at our practices as well as people? And so we have what we call our DIBA learning journey, which has 3 different pathways, one about the manager, one about the individual contributor, and one about the overall organization. And so we provide trainings and opportunities and workshops around those particular things. So one of the first activities I did in my second year, we started a book club. It's a book by Dr. Robert Livingston, who's a Harvard faculty, called The Conversation. And he really does a great job of presenting how to talk about racism and systemic racism in organizations. Now, 99.9% of the BIPOC folks who read the books, like, we know all this already. And I remind us that the book was not written for us.
For us,
It was
right.
written for understanding from the perspective of being majority culture. And so he gives great stories and factual information in a very non-threatening way. And so we had tons of staff members go through that, managers that went through it, senior leaders first, then managers went through a discussion series. And the manager said, we need to open this up to all staff. So this year, starting next month, we'll be starting discussion groups for all staff who want to join. So the strategy has to be something that's implementable. It has to be something that you've had input and buy-in from, but also something that's going to take, you're going to take the time to do. And I think one of the biggest detriments of this work is we always talk about metrics, what's measurable, what's not measurable. And the work that we're doing, changing people's biases, doesn't happen in 50 minutes. It doesn't happen in a day. It doesn't even happen in a year sometimes. And so sometimes we can't measure people's change, but we have to give people the tools to challenge themselves on this path to change. And we're all in various journeys. One of my favorite quotes that I share with people on campus is, I have attempted to walk on water many times and I have yet to be successful. So even me in my role as the AUO for Antiracism, I still have my own stuff that I have to work on. I still have my own stuff from childhood and the biases and experiences I've had that still sometimes gets triggered through trauma or experiences or microaggression or just a bad day. Something happened on the news. So all of this is continual work, and it's about humans, and it's not about the metrics. It's not about checking a box. It's about, if you're sincere about creating the space, doing the hard work to make sure the space is created.
Awesome. Well, I want you to think about this, Dr. Offord, as we are in this conversation, as we sit here on this 22nd day of the month of February, a time in which we honor, celebrate, and observe Black History Month. And we acknowledge that there was a time when Black people would be killed for learning to read and write. Yet here we are, 159 years out of enslavement, flexing our literacy superpowers, I call it, as information specialists, culture keepers, and information purveyors. How do you feel knowing that you are the realization and the personification of what your ancestors dreamed of? And how does that motivate you to do the work that you continue to do?
Great question. So as I shared earlier, I was, raised by my grandparents. So a lot of what I do, I honor them in this work. My grandfather was illiterate and my grandmother had a 6th grade education. And so I remember as a kid coming home and my grandfather used to always say, boy, get your lesson, which for those who don't understand what that means do your homework. And so I was in my 30s and I finally asked my mom, I was like, why was granddaddy so hard on me about doing homework? And she said, you don't remember? I'm like, yeah, I remember him telling me everybody else outside playing and I got to sit in the house and do homework. She says, no, he was excited when you would come home from school because you were teaching him how to read and write. And so
Wow.
that is a consistent reminder to me that
Wow.
you don't know from when someone is coming. And so
Right.
I'm very humbled and giving and finding ways that are unique to really find a way to promote our profession and the work that we do, because we use the fancy words, cultural keepers and literacy agents, but what we really are powerful human beings to ensure that people have the space to learn and develop ideas and thinking on their own. That's what we do. And so public libraries have a great mission to do that work publicly. Academic libraries do it in their sphere of influence, but what if all of us did it together, academic or public? And so one of the things I call myself a unicorn in the profession is because I've had experience on the student affairs side and the academic affairs side. So I continue to see how what we do connects beyond the physical space, beyond the transactional interactions of reference or research or faculty engagement. How does that transition and translate to people's lives after college, or their lives, even inspiring them to go on to get a degree, even if it's not an MLS degree? How do they give back? How do we talk about all those things as BIPOC folks and the impact to our community? So it's broader than just us being literacy agents or cultural keepers. It's about us being cultural expanders and literary expanders into the world.
Awesome, awesome. That was powerful, Dr. Offord. Thank you. Thank you for that. Speaking of advice and, thinking of others entering this profession, what advice would you give other Black male librarians or those interested in pursuing a career in library and information science?
Oh boy. So I always start with select a program that resonates with you. Library schools programs all have basic foundational curriculum, but then some have different aspects of what you may be interested in, what you want your long-term plan to be as far as being in the profession. Some of us are folks who want to be in libraries. Some of us want to work in auxiliary services for libraries, which I think are equally important, which is why we created created the Adiba internship at Harvard, bringing in folks who are interested in human resources, who are interested in finance, who are interested in facilities, who also need to learn about library science, the nuances of our profession and our facilities, but help them translate and transition into roles in libraries. But I think it's about mentoring. It's really about mentoring and representation. And so what I would say is, if you don't have a mentor, find a mentor, or mentors, plural, because we all have different things we can give. You don't need one. You can have as many as you need and then plug into us as you need us. Or we can do tag team and however you want. Really look at, your interests and desires and where you want to be. Think about your career trajectory, but also be prepared to understand that you are coming into a community where there's not many of us. And so you said earlier that 7% of librarians are Black. And I believe the last statistic I saw, 0.5 of that was men.
Men,
And so
right.
even in the Black sphere of librarianship, Black women are predominantly match what the 81% of white women match for the profession. And so understanding that there's some people, I guess what I think folks outside of the library profession understand is that Black men are emasculated because they're librarians. Sometimes we are challenged with promotion because we have to move. And so that becomes very different with family. I know that's some of the challenges for our sisters in the profession, especially if they're not the primary financial partner in the relationship or have partners who don't want to move or relocate. So all of that impacts all of our abilities to transition and look at promotions and growth and change. But also sometimes going into an organization where you're the only one or even one of two or three can be challenging. And most of us don't want that environment. Some of us can handle it very well. Some cannot. And understanding that if you can live in a small town and be one of the few people of color on the staff and you can navigate those waters, then amazing. If you're not, understand that very early on because it can lead to depression, it can lead to anxiety, it can lead to a lot of things. So it really is about knowing self and understanding this profession is rich and available and we need representation. Black and brown boys and girls need to see us in libraries and not just public libraries and academic libraries and spaces like Harvard and as well as, HBCU. So, we're needed. And, if you stay the course, the profession will do you well. I tell people all the time, it's not a sprint, it's a journey.
Well, I want to share something with you real quick. I want to read something to you and the audience, if you all will indulge me. This is from The Invisible Ache, Black Men Identifying Their Pain and Reclaiming Their Power by Courtney B. Vance and Dr. Robin L. Smith with Sharice Jones. And it's just a little small passage in a section in this book that says, "Seek and don't hide. Black boys and men are also worthy of play, of experiencing unmitigated, unrelenting Black joy. You deserve to revel in pleasure and frivolity. That means being able to be childlike even if you're grown. That means being comfortable engaging in an activity that society might typically define as soft, or that some of your peers reject as something other folks do, but not us. No one can dictate how something makes you feel, and so there's no need to hide or deny whatever revives your spirit. Not long ago, Black men frolicking was trending on social media. The videos showed brothers running and even skipping through fields. Some lay down on the grass. They were smiling, laughing, and clearly feeling elated. Feel free to frolic, walk barefoot through a mud patch if that makes you happy. Plant a garden, pick up a hula hoop, plunge into a pool. It's important that Black men abused and exploited for so long be encouraged to explore what brings them pleasure, both with and apart from their families and partners. For Black men and boys who are often attacked and disparaged, honoring yourself is the greatest gift you can receive, because not only does it safeguard your physical and emotional health, but those acts of self-care can give you the energy you need to support all those who are in your concentric circles of friendship and love. With that passage read, Dr. Offord, I would like to ask you, when the going gets tough, what are some ways in which you find joy and manage your self-care?
Well, it's taking time, but one of the things that I have learned is that I love getting on the airplane and going to somewhere outside the country. So the whole concept of travel has to be with a group of people. You have to have this itinerary. You got to visit everything. I've debunked for myself, so I can, go to London for 10 days by myself and be okay. And if that means just walking around, touring London and seeing London or seeing museums or not, whatever, or jumping on a plane going to Cancun. And I know all of those are resource-based, so I'm not saying everybody can do that. But one of the other things is, and since Gerald keeps popping up on the screen here from the chat, I'm going to use him as an example. One of the things when I was at Lincoln, I always did is I love to cook. My grandparents owned a restaurant. They started off as a waitress and a busboy in a restaurant when they met, and eventually, years later, bought the restaurant from the retiring owner. So I spent many years in the restaurant cooking, cleaning, washing dishes, learning the cash register. But one of the things that I did consistently when I was at Lincoln was creating a safe space for Black men. And I used to say that we need a place where we can come and just be Black men without the constraints of sex or the concept of chasing sex or any of the other barriers that people have put around Black men being over-sexualized, and that's all that we think about, or alcohol being involved. That we could just sit, eat, drink, and have a good time. Drink, not alcohol with the students, just to be very clear. I know we're recording, but sit, have a good time. So cooking that Thanksgiving style Big Mama meal, which is something I love to do. And they love to eat. So by the way, so it worked out well. They would just come crash in my house literally on the weekends, and we would spend time watching football, just talking, sometimes having emotional conversations, talking about problems, and just having, just being in space. So I think we have to create and mimic a space where Black men can truly let go of machismo or the toxic masculinity or whatever we want to call it that society has placed on us, to just be. And so some of that has to be trained, because we've been trained even by our families that we don't do that. You don't share emotions. You work hard. You take care of your provider. You're last. Everybody else is first. And so how we have to create space doing that. One of my outside passions and how I recharge myself from this work is I have been working with the Mr. HBCU Kings Competition and Leadership Conference for a number of years. I'm the volunteer president and CEO. And so I get to work with these young Black men every year, and our focus has been mental health. And so sitting in a space with young Black men who are college students say to me, I have never talked to a mental health professional in my life. Thank you for having a licensed counselor here for me to talk to, because I just have so much I have to say. Mm-hmm. And to hear some of the pain they experience, 18, 19, 20 years old, the trauma they've experienced, the issues they've experienced, and how they've been judged if they bring up their feelings as being soft men. You mentioned earlier in the book read. So if we could start training them how to navigate some of the things that some of us are still learning in our 40s and 50s how to do, I think it's better for our community as a whole. It's better for our families. It's better for them. It's better for the world. And so me making sure the space is created for other young Black men is how I refill my cup.
Awesome. Awesome. This has been life-changing for me, Dr. Offord. So I'm saying thank you early for even having this conversation. We're going to start taking some questions from the chat. This is from, forgive me if I pronounce it wrong, it's Musa, from Musa. What would you say is your biggest challenge as you endeavor to recruit more Blacks into the profession of librarianship?
I think one of the biggest challenges has always been people think about library science and librarianship based on their interactions with librarians and libraries. Many of us are coming from communities where we don't have thriving libraries or institutions that don't have thriving libraries. And so if my mindset on librarianship happens to be that negative experience I had in my small library, my small HBCU library, with a staff member who was not nice to me, not kind, and who may have been a librarian or not, I don't know. If that is my perception of the profession, that's going to be, of that experience, that becomes my perception of the profession. If we don't have good interactions, I remember they closed the public library in my community when I was a kid. So if there wasn't a public library to go to, or some of the schools who are now closing their school libraries, if they don't have interactions and positive interactions with librarians, the perceptions can continue on that, I don't want to go to the library, or, what is the library for? I can just Google everything. So I think we have to meet people where they are. But the other part of it is giving exposure. And so again, the students that I had in the library science program at Lincoln, their world was Lincoln's library or their libraries they had in high school or grade school. But I think their eyes became broader about the profession when I took them to ALA and said, this is the library world. So I took them to the BCLA. They had a student membership to BCLA, took them to ALA. And that was the icing on the cake for them to decide this is a profession I can see myself in, because they saw the magnitude and the power of our collective work being in those spaces for professional development. If it's all only about what they see and know from their microcosm of the world, they will never connect to the greater picture of our profession.
This is from Morgan. How do you, Dr. Offord, not take your work home with you?
Well, I don't know many of us that don't at my level in the organization. My work is not transactional, so sometimes I laugh. I kind of chuckle, and it's like, that 9 to 5 punch clock sure sounds good on this week, but sometimes it's hard to. And I'll be transparent. The day that President Gay resigned at Harvard was actually my birthday, and I was out treating myself to brunch. Kind of took the day off. My birthday is a holiday for me, so I don't ever work on my birthday. And I get this message from a friend, WTF, and I was like, what? President Gay. I was like, what happened to President Gay? And so I jumped and checked my email, and literally I finished eating and I just came home and just sat in solitude. So sometimes the work will come home depending on what's happening, but I try my best to not bring it home. So there's times when I do bring it home and there's times I don't. And so I love the fact about the Harvard environment is that we're encouraged to unplug. And so it's taboo at Harvard during like days when the university is closed to send emails, engage staff, and especially when, sorry, my computer did something very weird, especially when, things are happening as far as closures, we don't call each other. That was the first thing. That was very new for me coming to Harvard when I came to Harvard. So even an organization making that a value and a belief that, we don't take work home, or we don't ping people after work, or if I send an email, being very explicit about saying, just because I send an email at midnight, because I might be working late, because I may be having the creative juices happening, that does not mean you have to respond. That is okay for you to respond when you get into work. Gotcha. So creating those boundaries and barriers for yourself. Turning your phone off, don't pick up the laptop, looking at your favorite Netflix series, or, driving to the beach.
I'm learning that lesson. Let's see. Um, Lisa asked, what is the name of the first book you referenced again?
The Conversation by Dr. Robert Livingston.
Okay. And Sharon is asking, how do we stay encouraged and motivated as librarians of color when we bear the burden of dealing with stress of racism?
Yeah, that's a good question, Sharon. And I don't have a perfect answer, because I think we, as educated and trained people of color in any role that we're in, are dealing with that in this environment. And I think it gets more stressful the higher you go in an organization. I think we have to be honest about it. I am very quick to tell my colleagues I'm not okay. Every time a new article or something that popped up, within the last 6 weeks about Harvard, I've been very vocal about I'm not okay, and I'm going to ask for forgiveness now when I say this. But I said to my boss, I was like, today I just don't want to be around white people, and that was a very bold statement. She's white, and she's like, I understand, I get it, and she gave me permission. And I know this is my situation at Harvard. I know everybody can't do it, but she's like, if you have those moments when you just feel like you're overwhelmed on campus, feel free to work from home. If you need to do more remote work, then do more remote work. Because my first go-to whenever I'm in one of those spaces are those pictures behind me. I want to see my god babies, which are my great niece and great nephew. They help fill my cup. And so I'm like, I'm just going to go to DC for a few days and I'll work from there. But being around them and family really helps me to recenter, to rethink, and help, just get myself there. But being honest and truthful about it is the most important thing that we can do. And, if our colleagues are not allies enough to support us in that work, then that's a value we have to rethink about the organization we're with.
And Sharon Owens asks, what advice do you have for librarians of color working in urban libraries?
Advice. Sharon, I'm not sure what you mean by what I guess is general advice in urban environments. It really depends on the library and the community. So my advice would be that, continue to do outreach, continue to find ways to connect with the community, and organizations, bring other organizations in. A lot of the Divine Nine, or the 9 Black fraternities and sororities, the 100 Black Men of America, Jack and Jill, all these organizations that serve our community, all have some type of educational outreach program. And many of us are in those organizations, finding ways to tie in what we do and our passion and what fills our cup into what we do every day as librarians. And so in urban communities, I know we have different issues around mental health, around social work and things like that. And the public libraries are tackling it very hard. And, my heart goes out to those who are dealing with that every day, as we reckon with and acknowledge as a society the importance of mental health, and, understanding that everyone's experience may not be the best, even with mental health services or with our faith services or faith organizations. So for those of you that are on the front line dealing with those issues, I commend you tremendously. But finding ways to just, continue to build resources and networks to help tell about the profession, but also bring people into our spaces.
Curtis asks, other than BIPOC staff, what are some measures of successful progress towards making the library less racist?
So I'll share a couple of things that we've done here at Harvard that we've implemented. And so one of the things is, even amidst the book bans and the challenges of DEI and all of that, one of the first things is we created our anti-racism team model. And what that means is that instead of, me or folks thinking that Jerome's going to do all the anti-racism work, is the way to bring other folks into the work that we do, is we decided to go with a model of creating anti-racism teams. And so our first team, which is like a working group that we created in charge, and we got tremendous amounts of support and folks want to be engaged. was an anti-racism collections team. And that group of folks throughout the library who works with collections, and even from reparative language to buyers, bibliographers, catalogers. Yes, we still call them bibliographers at Harvard. So, but all the folks engaged with managing and curating the collection, having conversation around what it means to build an anti-racist collection. Now, that does not mean that we have not built a diverse collection. That is not what we're saying. And we probably have one of the world's most diverse collections. However, that does not mean that there's not bias in the purchasing process. There's not bias in particular works. One of the things is, I decided one day, I want to just look and see if we have any books by Louis Farrakhan. Search, oh, not a Louis Farrakhan book in the collection. Like out of 20 million volumes, we don't have one Farrakhan book. So how do we understand from an anti-racism lens that may not be okay? And what other voices are we not collecting that we are either through bias not selecting or not challenging the publishers or the companies that are providing us with the buying plans and the books, not challenging them to diversify their collection, because we can't fault bibliographers or other collection development specialists for picking materials that's just presented through them because our contract with these buyers and these vendors say that we're going to work with these vendors. And so we take what they present in front of us. What are we doing to challenge them? And so one of the things that we're going to be talking about with this collections committee team is how do we have conversations around prior to signing contracts with vendors around their diversity plan and how they curate diversity book collections as a part of their overall buying plans. So yes, that gives us some power to say, we're going to challenge you as a part of this value for us as an organization. And oh, by the way, if you're not providing this for us, then we may go with a different vendor. And so doing that work, as well as one of the things that I have to say is, we have to ask ourselves, what voices have we not collected or not collecting? We know that women in China cannot publish certain materials. And so, but they're being published, but where? They're being published in Turkey. So how do we find these materials to ensure that we even have dissenting voices in the collection? Because if we're true libraries and librarians, we want to make sure that the collection is diverse with multiple types of voices within the collection. Intersectionality is celebrated in the collection, and all those pieces are coming from a non-biased place. So again, we have a very diverse collection, a very diverse experiential collection, but now having conversations around, from an anti-racism lens, what voices have we not collected and why?
I have to say, before going to the next question, sir, you just hit the nail on the head of what some of us are experiencing in our public libraries with our collection development departments, just them understanding the arguments, the points you just made. But I'll digress and go on to the next question. From William, can Dr. Offord talk more about navigating librarianship as a Black manager in a largely white space, especially with microaggressive pushback? We want to stay because it's your home community.
Yeah, so one of the things that we just had, here's an example I'll use, William. Thank you for that question. A lot of us lament on our own in our organizations and assume, and even our organizations lament with their own issues because they're afraid of somebody learning about what's happening inside the organization. Well, I'm gonna tell you a secret. Everybody's dealing with the exact same thing. So we have to come out of our organizations to have these conversations to say, oh, you're dealing with that too? Oh, I'm dealing with that too. And then we may have somebody in the group say, I had that problem, that's how I fixed it. So I think part of it is truth-telling, understanding the political nuances of the organization and how far you can push around dealing with microaggressions. Most of the time, by the time management learns of it, it's not a microaggression anymore. It's a macroaggression because they piled up over time. But even for us at Harvard, we have folks in the organization that have said they've experienced microaggressions. But one of the things we realize, and all it takes is asking the question, I was like, well, how do we report these? And people said, Well, there is no way for folks to report them. We just have people talk to HR, and it's like, well, what does HR do with them? So I naturally learn by asking questions, and I tell people that all the time, and it bites me sometimes, especially in personal relationships. It's like I learn by asking questions. I don't mean anything's wrong. I just want to ask the question to help think about something and to absorb information. But being able to ask key questions, as well as knowing who our true allies are that we can go ask direct questions to, that may be able to help us get deeper into the situation helps. But it's really about finding allies who, and when I say allies, I want to be clear. We're not talking about allies who turn their allyship on and off when it's convenient. I'm talking about those who are consistently showing up as an ally, who you have hard conversations with, who won't judge your statements, who won't minimize your thoughts, who won't minimize your experience, to help you navigate the waters as an ally. And so we all need that. And I'm not saying that we have to downplay our voice in the process, but sometimes I can have my allies say, you know what, that's wrong. And let me take this for you. Let punt this one to me and I got it. And so being able to have folks that you trust and support to do that work for you helps tremendously, because you can chime in and you have support from others to do that work. But it's hard navigating a predominantly white environment. It just is. And it has been for us for over 400 years. In the United States, that is, in colonized United States.
This is from Chloe. As an openly queer person, I am really curious about ways you think we can build stronger bonds between our communities.
Well, as an openly gay man, the building is understanding that we continue to find ways to find similarity. I think American culture, and we're seeing it in our politics, has continued to push marginalized communities to fight against each other. And so it's all about comparativeness, and it shows up every day on campus. And so how we navigate those experiences and how we navigate this work together becomes more challenging. So one of the things that we're created at Harvard Library is, we've created the university has employee resource groups, but I'm also saying we create our own affinity groups internally, because library staff have needs within our library and need communities where they feel like they belong and can have voice or represent them in the organization. And so we just started them in January, and our first one, ironically, one of our very first one is working parents and invisible disabilities. And so it's been great conversations for folks to talk about invisible disabilities and what that means, how that impacts work, what about the microaggressions. And so this is when people see marginalization differently than just race. And so what are the opportunities for commonality training, commonality conversations, for support? But all of the marginalized communities are under attack at some point by the non-marginalized communities. And I'm not saying we all come together and sing Kumbaya, but we do find ways to empower each other to fight the power, as they've said over the years. But how do we find the commonalities around? The commonality is marginalization. And how do we rebound for that? Understanding that even in our marginalized communities, there are some semblance of power that we all have, and privileged power to a certain extent, that we also have to reconcile with.
This question is from Randy, and I think he said question for the presenter, so I'm going to assume that means you, Dr.
That could be you, Gerald.
It could be me too. What are your thoughts about organizations and libraries that are moving away from EDI titles or using words such as diversity?
From my perspective and in my role and what I'm seeing happening, all of this is political. And for some organizations, it's about survival, and they have to. Our colleagues in Texas, Wisconsin, the Dakotas, Florida, possibly now Tennessee, in order to survive, they're needing to make that change. My title, I was asked if I wanted to change my title. I said no. I know that my title is a target, but I also know that I'm at a private institution that could say we're still going to do this until differently, right? So I prefer to use the terms EDI versus DEI because I believe if you build an equitable organization first, diversity and inclusion comes naturally. Hiring for diversity and then trying to fight for equality or equity has been our challenge over the years, and it continues to be our challenge as a people and as a profession. If we can sit and have conversations about what it means to be an equitable organization first, and create the processes and the systems and the structure to create an equitable organization, regardless of race, gender, or sexuality, then diversity naturally is welcomed. If the conversation around equity is always on the curtails of diversity, we're going to continue to fight because people are thinking equitability automatically means for diversity. And it's not. It should be equitable as an organization first, which embraces and celebrates and welcomes diversity.
I think this is our last question. We only have time for one more. This is from Adrian. Do you have any advice about how to grow in the profession for Black men who are early career academic librarians? And there's a second part. Is there anything you wish you had known or someone you wish had told you when you were getting started?
Yeah, so I would say, Adrian, one of the things is find a mentor. Mentors often find ways to help you plug into opportunities for learning and growing. I have sponsored mentors to participate in trainings and events that I've had at organizations I've been a part of, finding ways to find support to even figure out where you want to go or experience, what tracks you want to talk about, but even just fellowshipping with folks. And so looking into ways of tapping into people to give you opportunities beyond where you are. And the one thing that they didn't tell me before I came in this profession, again, I walked into this thinking this is very Pollyanna or profession, and no one told me that I knew it was there, but I didn't know the strength of it being there until I was BCLA president. That the extreme racism in our profession mimics that of our greater community and society. And everyone in our profession is not in support of open access. They're not in support of, they're not against book bannings. They're not against, defunding, marginalized communities. They're not all diversity advocates. They're not all allies. They're not LGBT friendly. And so based on the values that I was taught in class, we all have read Michael Gorman's library values, all of that. The profession will teach you that this is a place of safety, belonging, inclusivity, and we're here for all, and that is not true. And once you reconcile that as a professional, which I also think adds to our attrition issue because people are sold a dream that doesn't come true. Once you reconcile that and recognize that, you find power in your voice and your involvement in the profession becomes stronger, or you continue to do the work and you pull out of some of the professional engagement because you just don't want to fight the battles anymore.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to say thank you again so much, Dr. Offord. It has been a pleasure having this conversation, and it was needed. More of it is needed. And I thank you for being so transparent and just keeping it real with issues that all of us are going through. Again, and thank you, Dr. Cook and Sierra, for inviting me to be Absolutely. A part of this. And I encourage everyone that's on to please register for the other conversations in the Critical Conversation series. Dr. Cook, turn it over to you.
Yeah, you did most of it for me. Thank you, Gerald.
Okay.
I just want to thank my brothers so much. This has been just such a powerful and enlightening and authentic conversation. And I know I've been deeply moved. And shout out to Dr. Offord's mentees that are in the chat saying that they became a librarian because of you. That is just beautiful. And it's a wonderful way to get this series started. So thank you both so much for getting us started. And as Gerald mentioned, we have 4 more webinars coming up in this series. So please stay tuned. Come ask your amazing questions. We're sorry we didn't get to all of the questions today, but you'll have more opportunity to come ask our other speakers in the coming weeks. So we are very grateful that you spent some time with us today, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you very much, Jerome and Gerald. I applaud you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks.